Hello, everyone, and welcome to this session on sustainable wood fuel value chains for security in Sub-Saharan Africa, hosted by the Center for International Forest Research (CIFOR) in partnership with ICRAF, FAO, the Forest and Farm Facility, and African Clean Energy. Thank you for joining us today. We are still in the record-making process of making the GLF Bond 2020 the biggest global digital conference in this year. I am Daniel Loredu, and I'm from Ghana, and I'm the community specialist for the Global Landscapes Forum. I'm with the firm belief that one day, just one day, the son of the charcoal seller would also wear a white shirt. So to start our session, I'd like you to open the website sli.do/slido, either on your mobile device or on any new tab on your computer. Then you'd enter the event code, #GLFBond 2020. Are you there with me? Good. All right. So select the room for this session, which is entitled GML and CIFOR, as in GML, and CIFOR, CIFOR, and answer to this question. Now, this is the question. What is the first thing that comes to your mind when you think of wood fuel? Type a quick one, just one word. It should be the first thing that comes into your head. Let me see. Deforestation, energy, trees, pollution, charcoal. Wow, those are very wonderful words there. There are more. Cutting trees. That's nice. Any more? Okay. It looks like pellets, energy, trees, deforestation. Those are very wonderful views that we are getting here today. That's nice. Thank you all. Yes, thank you all for your comments. So in today's session, we would rethink these assumptions. As you might all know, wood fuel is the most important source of energy for cooking across Sub-Saharan Africa. Millions of livelihoods actually depend on wood fuel in order to survive in most African countries, but sometimes at the expense of the forest. So today, we're going to discuss how we can make wood fuel value chains more sustainable. I think it just goes in line with the theme of the event. How can we continue feeding the people on this planet without eating the planet up itself? That's so wonderful. And so this is how this session is also going to take up, and we are going to see how the wood fuel sector can also positively contribute to promote food security in this continent. So we'll start by watching a short video from Zambia, where CIFOR explains to us the many challenges to make charcoal production much more sustainable. There you go.
Zambia's largely undocumented charcoal trade is huge. Estimated to contribute 3% to the national GDP, the sector informally employs 500,000 people, most of whom are rural smallholder producers. Sylvia, a mother of 5, is one of them. She lives in Nimba district, one of the highest charcoal producing regions in the country.
I was living in poverty. That's when I started doing charcoal production. Now I earn a good income. It pays for my children's school fees and my daily needs like soap and sugar.
Though charcoal may fetch a high price, it doesn't come cheap. The production cycle is painstaking, and women are increasingly involved at each step of the charcoal value chain. One must chop trees, roll logs to make a kiln, set the kiln ablaze and let it burn for 2 weeks, then pack the charcoal chips into bags to sell. 27-year-old Mavuto needs to walk 1 hour from her house to get to this production site.
It's very tough. This job is supposed to be for men because of the physical labor, but women are supporting the men now to earn a living.
The high profits of the charcoal trade has led to increased production levels at the expense of Zambia's forests. Although laws exist to regulate the trade, they are rarely followed.
Nyimba is a very vast district, and there are areas that we don't touch maybe in 2, 3, 4 months, and you may not know what is happening in those areas. And in other instances, we have a lot of other responsibilities as foresters. So you find that you are busy with one other thing, the people are getting in, producing charcoal and transporting it to Lusaka, which is a very difficult situation to control.
Under the country's Forest Act, both charcoal producers and sellers require permits. These permits must be obtained at the local forestry district where the individual lives. The production license allows them to produce charcoal within a 14-day period. Then, to move the charcoal out of the district for sale, a second license, called a conveyance license, is required. Yet these rules aren't strictly enforced, so most people operate illegally.
There are middlemen who bring me this charcoal that I buy in bulk. I have no idea where they actually source the charcoal.
Traders, or middlemen from the city, are charging 2 to 3 times more for a bag of charcoal than the sourcing price asked by producers in the rural areas.
Forestry department, because of their limitations, they don't really monitor charcoal production at production level. So I would think it would be very important monitoring the whole chain from production to trade, actually, to make sure that we know what is happening at each stage.
The Center for International Forestry Research, C4, is currently helping the Zambian government develop recommendations to address this issue. Beyond saving the forests, this project aims to boost the equity and well-being of smallholder charcoal producers.
So how did that go? Thank you all for this wonderful video. I hope the video gave you a better overview about the issues at stake. And now we are going to start our conversation with a discussion panel. I'll give the microphone to Jolene from C4. She's a C4 associate and our moderator for today's session. Jolene, thank you very much. Over to you then.
Thank you, Daniel. Good day to all of you out there. Glad that you could join our event. My name is Jolien Schuren. I work as C4 Associate for the Governing Multifunctional Landscapes Program on Sustainable Wood Fuel. We work in several African countries, and I'm very glad that we have a great panel today bringing a lot of experience and expertise to the table. So without further ado, give them a chance to present themselves. Let's go to Kenya first.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Posi Sosola. I work for ICRAF, the World Agroforestry Center, focusing on natural resource governance, especially wood fuel value chains. The governance part of the wood fuel value chains from the sustainable production to sustainable consumption. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Abdon Awono. I'm a C4 ICRAF scientist based in Yaoundé. I think I should talk about my story with wood fuel directly. First of all, I will mention that I grew up in a small village not far from Yaoundé. And I do remember our clothes used to smell smoke because my mother was cooking with wood fuel in the same house we were sleeping. And the second point is that when I moved to the secondary school, we were forced to bring a bunch of fuel wood to the teachers every Monday. It was the condition to go to the classroom. And the last one, when I came to Yaoundé 30 years ago, I was convinced I was moving to the big city, the modern city, where everyone had access to electricity and gas. Big error. My elder sister, who took care of me, was only using fuel wood for cooking. And up to now, more than 80% of the households in the city are relying on wood biomass for food security and energy. You can then understand why I've decided to put all my efforts in improve wood fuel value chains in Sub-Saharan Africa, because it is more than a jury. Thank you. Over.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ruben Walker. I'm the founder and CEO of African Clean Energy. We manufacture and distribute a hybrid household energy system. Just put it into camera. That's it. It's a hybrid because it burns biomass of any description, really. It can be sticks and twigs, animal dung, agricultural waste, but also things like sustainably produced pellets and briquettes. And it does it cleanly because there's a ventilator under the combustion chamber that drives extra oxygen into your fire. And that what happens is it converts all your woody biomass into a gas, burns off as gas, and just like with a gas stove, there's no smoke. The system also provides basic electricity needs for things like LED lighting, mobile phone charging, smaller appliances like a radio. And in doing so, we sort of are able to capture the entire energy need of many households. There is some fundamental misunderstanding in the access to energy sector that has a reading that as long as we provide electricity to communities, that will cover their energy needs. And unfortunately, that's not true, because electricity in most cases only represents a tiny amount of the energy consumed. You've got LED lighting, which takes a few watts. You've got mobile phones, takes a few watts. Cooking, 3,000 watts, and people just do not have the money to pay for those kilowatt hours. And so they remain cooking on wood fuel or charcoal inefficiently, and that is causing the sorts of impact that we just saw in that video on Zambia.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Xia Zhuzhang. I'm a forestry officer working on wood energy here at FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. I've been working on energy poverty and energy access for a long time. But in these past 6 years, working exclusively on wood energy, firewood, and charcoal issues. Thank you.
Musonda, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Musonda Kapena, and I work with the Zambia National Forest Commodity Association here in Zambia. I'm a forester as my primary background, but we also work with the producer groups under the association, especially those that produce charcoal and firewood as well. So what I'm bringing on board is the grassroots experience on what we have done as a country, and also how charcoal is produced, why the people produce it that way, and also how it competes for land use systems with relation to food security, but also what mitigation measures we've been able to exhibit, and also on the participatory guarantee system to try and have an organized charcoal production aspect among the people that have a livelihood directly connected to charcoal production as a measure of wood fuel. Thank you very much. I look forward to this session.
Thank you all. So let's start this with a very simple question. It might be the big elephant in. Thank you all. I wanted to start this session with a very simple question, but maybe the big elephant in the room. So why are we still discussing wood fuels? Xia, can you give us an overview on the current status of wood fuel in Africa today?
Thank you, Yuli. I would like to start with a few numbers to help set the scene. As many of us know that, it means wood fuel is still a very important cooking energy in developing countries. The latest report tracking the SDG 7 progress released last month indicated that there are still 2.8 billion people worldwide that do not have access to clean cooking solutions. And this number, and out of this 2.8 billion, 2.4 billion rely on wood or charcoal for cooking. This is about 1/3 of the world population. And the percentage in African countries is even higher. I mean, in Sub-Saharan Africa, about 2/3 of the population rely on wood fuel for cooking. So to meet these demands of wood fuel, about 90% of the wood harvested from the forest or woodland in African countries, in average, will be used for energy purpose. So just think about the whole energy, whole wood from the forest. If it's accounting for 90%, it's really a very high percentage. And in addition to that, the wood fuel value chains involved roughly 200 million people in African countries. I mean, this could be a full-time basis, could be part-time basis. And this is roughly about 5% of the employment opportunities in the region. So this also generates income to support this kind of livelihood. And this high reliance on wood fuel has social, economic, and environmental impact. And this has led to concerns on sustainable forest management, indoor air pollution, and health, gender equity, among others. And people may ask, what is the development trend with the wood fuel sector? How this changes over time? Well, despite the worldwide effort, the progress with access to clean cooking solution has been very slow. Currently, it's about 63% of the population have access, but still have 37% do not have access. Well, if you look into the historical trends, the increase in the past 10 years is less than 10%, less than 1% every year, or less than 0.4% in Sub-Saharan Africa. It's pretty slow. So to achieve this universal access to clean cooking solutions by 2030, there are 37% to go in 10 years. In the past 10 years, we only make the progress of 10%. And we have 37% to go in the coming 10 years. This will require significant investment. How does the investment look like? The International Energy Agency estimated that the requirement for investment to achieve this kind of universal access to the clean cooking is about $4 each year in the coming in 20 years, from 2010 to 2030. Well, this seems a big number, but in average is just about $1.5 US per year per capita, if divided by the population without access to the clean cooking solutions. And the actual investment is much lower than the requirement. In comparison, the annual investment in the energy sector is about 2 trillion every year. This is about 500 times more than the amount required for clean cooking solutions. So under the current development trend, it is likely that wood fuel will continue to be an important energy for large population over a long time, probably still 2.3 billion people by 2030. This is why we have to put due effort on wood energy for the years to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Xia. So we hear that wood fuel is abundantly used and will be used in the foreseeable future. But then what happened in the cases where the governments try to stop production or trade of wood fuel? Sola, can you give us some insights on what happened in Kenya?
Thank you, Yolene. Putting up a ban is an effort to try and control the levels of production and trade of wood fuel. It doesn't necessarily control the consumption of wood fuel. And it really never leads to the desired objective in the end. The objective is to save forests. The objective is to make sure that there is less deforestation, but most of the time it doesn't have the desired effect. Putting up the bans most of the time is the lack of good governance and capacity to enforce the laws. So what happens when you have a ban? In most cases, the bans that are put out just criminalize one part of the value chain. It doesn't stop the whole value chain. Here in Kenya, what happened, we actually had a logging moratorium and also a ban in charcoal trade or charcoal movement, not necessarily charcoal production. So you can still produce your charcoal for subsistence. In quotes, most of the time it finds itself on the market. So most people are allowed to produce at least 3 bags of charcoal for subsistence, but that doesn't stipulate how many times you produce the 3 bags, because now all the 3 bags find their way to the roadside for sale, and the truck can buy all the bags on the roadside. Or a pile of 3 times 15 piles of 3 bags can still belong to one person. Because of what Sia has just said, there is insatiable demand in the urban centers. Less than 40% of people have access to affordable and clean energy. The rest will still require charcoal. So that's what we are facing here right now. I think the first week we really saw a dip in the conveyance of charcoal. There were fewer charcoal trucks coming in. We also had a spike in the price of the charcoal in the cities. Prices went up. And that disfranchised the poor urban who actually depend on the charcoal in the end, because even with a ban, no alternatives are offered to the poor in the urban center. And at the same time, 54% of the people in Kenya use staking in terms of energy sources. So in the energy mix, there will always be wood fuel. There will always be charcoal, regardless of income, regardless of wealth status, regardless of education, there is always charcoal in the energy mix. So what governments are looking to do is to reduce that energy mix, the proportion of charcoal in the energy mix. But so far, we haven't seen that happening. What has also happened is that we have shifted the supply basins across the border. So more charcoal is coming through from Uganda, more charcoal is coming through from Tanzania. So that is shifting the problem to your neighbor. That's what happens with most bans in Kenya, in Zambia, in Tanzania, is the same experience. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sola. So wood fuel will find its way to the consumers, to the households that need it for cooking. And of course, that's the most obvious link with the food security, the wood or the charcoal that's needed for cooking. That's a reliable and consistent resource, often available. But there are other links. Sia, can you maybe give us some insights on those links between wood fuel and food security?
Thanks, Julie. Yes, we all know that energy is essential to food production, food processing, food preserving, and also cooking. There are actually 2 concepts involved. One is called the food security, another is the food safety. That's not exactly the same. And food security is talking more about the adequacy of food to the society in terms of the reliable supply or fair access. While the food safety is more about ensure food is it's safe, it's hygienic in the process of handling, preparation, storage. It's not harmful to the health. So the sustainable wood fuel production is important to both food security and food safety. How that links to the food security? I'll give you some example. Now, if the sustainable production of wood fuel contribute to the food production in terms of land use, in terms of ecosystem services. And also, the income generated from wood fuel production or wood fuel trade will help people to get this money to buy food or invest in agriculture. Now, how that relevant to food safety? Well, people may eat some food in raw, like you may eat fruit or nuts or some vegetables in raw, but most food have to be cooked for nutrition, for hygiene, for safety concerns. Also, cooked food is easy to digest, so better for nutrition intake. It may also enhance the taste or the flavor, so you like it, you eat more. Most importantly, the higher temperature when cooking will kill the harmful pathogens like bacteria, virus, or other parasites. And so it prevents food or the water from the foodborne diseases, from waterborne diseases. This may occur if you eat or drink not cooked water or food. I hope this makes some sense. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Sia. So we start wondering, with all this demand for wood fuels, both in the urban areas and in the rural areas, where is it all coming from? What areas are most prone for over-harvesting of wood fuel? And are these the same areas where food security is an issue? And in that case, what may happen? So what can you share regarding that?
Thanks, Yulin. Wood fuel production and trade is a livelihood issue. It is produced in the rural areas where only 7% of the people use it. In the case of Kenya, only 7% of the people in rural areas, including the small businesses, actually utilize charcoal. Most of the wood fuel is produced there to make sure people can sustain their households, to make sure people can pay school fees. We had an issue here when charcoal was banned in Kitui. The Kitui County government did a survey to actually look at the impact of that ban. They actually saw that most of the people became food insecure because they relied on the charcoal sales. Some of the children dropped out of school because their fees were paid by the funds from the charcoal. So people produce, they sell, and they still buy food. And the county government had to come up with strategies to support the people in the counties. If you come to the cities, I think in Africa, what we have seen happening is high urbanization rates. But those urbanization rates are not matched by provision of alternative energy sources besides wood fuel. So in the past, the impact of wood fuel was associated with areas around the city. So they are the ones that became degraded. But now we are seeing degradation 200, 300 kilometers away from Nairobi, away from Lusaka, away from Kampala. We are even seeing supply basins alleged as far as South Sudan supporting Kenya. And all that, the producers are there to make sure they can feed their families and they can have extra income. But on the other side, we have commercial traders who are actually in business to make money, not necessarily because they are dependent or they are solely desperate to depend on that cash. And that's why we are having these long value chains that are getting further and further away, and even getting into the forest, hiring non-resident people to actually produce the charcoal within the local settings where subsistence production would have led to degradation. But then these immigrant producers are the ones that are bringing this threat, but for them, they are also supplying the urban poor who actually need to cook their food. In Africa, we always want to cook our food and have the nice taste of wood fuel or charcoal. So yes, wood fuel, charcoal or wood energy will always be linked to food security.
Thank you, Sola. That's really illustrating how far the impact of any possible degradation might go. Musonda, we just saw the video on Zambia, and we saw the degradation following the charcoal making. What are your observations on how wood fuel and land productivity are interacting?
Thank you very much, Jolene. The situation for Zambia, I'll specifically speak of Choma. Choma is the provincial capital of Southern Province, and it's on the boundary of Zimbabwe, Botswana, and partly Namibia. So the ecological zone is more or less that kind of ecology. So for Choma, to be specific, there's a history. Once upon a time, it was the food basket of maize, beans, sorghum, or the agro products that we have. But because of the erratic rainfalls and the effects of climate change, what we've experienced is that there's a loss of fertile lands. And because of that, there's a need by the subculture of the people, which is mainly agrarian, to start searching for fertile lands. So it's two-pronged. There's a lot of land degradation in the sense that the old fields cannot yield as much food anymore. So under the pretext of opening up new lands for farming, they are cutting down trees on their farms or on common land and manufacturing charcoal, which is then recapitalizing their farming systems. These people often have cattle and goats and all, but because of the droughts, a lot of that has died off. So for them to find fertile land, they are going in and cutting down the trees, manufacturing charcoal and selling it out. But also, as Sola mentioned, there's another dynamic where immigrant charcoal producers are coming in from the urban areas, and they're not using sustainable methods of harvesting trees. They are clear cutting regardless of the charcoal species. And they're coming in with chainsaws and all that. So for Choma, we're lucky that in 2015, under FAO, Charcoal Association was created, which is now following a specific organized guideline in collaboration with the Forest Department and traditional leaders, so that all trees that are cut down for charcoal are species that are not conflicting with other uses like medicines and construction poles and stuff like that. So for Choma, it's a success story, or rather it's a work in progress, in the sense that most charcoal producers are in the association, and through study circle meetings at community level, they are learning how to cut down a tree so that it has a chance to regenerate. So as much as we are losing a lot of forest resources to charcoal, land is being opened up for fertile farming, and the old crop production areas are being allowed to regenerate, though it's at a slow pace because of the effects of climate change. So in a nutshell, we have suffered land degradation. We are suffering continued increased amounts of land being opened up for production of charcoal. But the fact that it's now an organized system, it's more easier to manage than when charcoal producers would just find a tree and chop it down for charcoal. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Musonda. Another country in the Southern African region is Lesotho. Ruben, I know that you and your company are active in Lesotho. So what are some of the experiences of your customers when it comes to finding wood and their lands?
Well, I mean, Lesotho does not have a lot of tree cover to begin with. And that has actually led to people being relatively sparing with their wood consumption. Charcoal production isn't really widely used because there just aren't the trees. And maybe it's interesting to maybe give a little bit of background on why charcoal. Because the reason why people choose to use charcoal rather than wood is twofold. On the one hand, it's slightly more convenient in the sense that wood burns a bit erratically and gives you flames, whereas charcoal gives you a smooth sort of heat. And two, charcoal has more energy density. So that's why the logistics chain chooses to transport charcoal into the city rather than wood, because you get twice the amount of energy essentially, or slightly less, per kilo of fuel that you're carrying in. But that is in itself catastrophic, because the practices of making charcoal require about 8 to 12 kilos of virgin wood for every kilo of charcoal, which means that just the fact that people are using charcoal means that they're using a factor of 4 or 5 times the amount of wood that someone in the rural areas who may use wood for their basic energy is using. So there's a huge step to be gained if you can actually switch people from charcoal to wood. Because energy can seem quite complex, I think that some stakeholders sort of lose the forest between the trees, pun intended. There aren't a lot of potential options that we have for the thermal energy consumption, that is the cooking and the heating for households across the continent. Essentially, it's biomass, so that includes wood and charcoal, and potentially ethanol, because ethanol is essentially a derivative of biomass. And the other option is fossil fuel. Think of gas, LPG, LNG. Things like solar, wind, nuclear, all the other options that people associate with energy are not relevant in this context because they require an energy grid which doesn't exist and a kilowatt hour price that people cannot afford. So it really comes down to where do we see the future? Is that 1 billion people now, 2.5 billion to 4 billion people in a few decades consuming sustainably produced biomass? Or do we see them switching to fossil fuel? That's really the only argument that there is. And if you agree with me that it's a bad idea in 2020 to migrate the entire continent to fossil fuels, we're going to need to find sustainable ways of using biomass. Quite often people have a negative association with the concept of wood fuel because of the negative way that it is both harvested and used. But wood fuel in itself isn't negative. The cleanest power stations in the world are Scandinavian biomass power stations. The difference between using wood unsustainably, such as we've seen in the video, and using it sustainably is the difference between something that is terrible to something that is best in class. And so it is really important that we don't demonize the concept of wood fuel. And another point, Sola's point on livelihoods, this is something that we cannot forget, is that a lot of people's livelihoods depend on this. It's just that their livelihoods depend on an industry which currently has a very, very negative impact on the amount of wood that's growing. Whereas if we flipped it and we actually created a sustainable biomass economy, because biomass needs to be, by definition, domestic, because shipping it around makes the relative cost go up too much. It's by definition a domestic industry, and it by definition will create a lot of jobs and be one of the major components of the economy of any developing country. So it's very important we don't demonize it, but we flip the industry so that it does keep supporting those livelihoods, except that those livelihoods are used for sustainable forestry practices, using agricultural waste in the right way. There are many, many examples of using biomass in a good way. Let's make it very, very clear that using biomass isn't necessarily bad. Unsustainable, terrible. Sustainable biomass, best in class. And this should be a major component of Africa's energy future.
Thank you, Ruben. I think this is a fantastic bridge to really looking into some of the solutions, because we can wonder if wood fuel productions can also be good food production systems at the same time. I think that is where we want to go. I know in the countries where we work, as Musonda was saying, often it's wood fuel that's being exploited as a byproduct of agriculture. But as you will see in a video later this session, you can also integrate trees in the crop production systems. My colleague George will show that in the video later on. And there are other solutions. Abdon, can you tell us something about the areas where a lot of refugees are living? What are the issues there around wood fuel, and what are you and your team doing there in order to create solutions to improved land systems?
Okay, thank you so much, Yolene. First of all, I would like to mention that when we talk about refugee sites here, we talk about the whole landscape, including the refugee camps and the areas where you have local communities. And the reality is that we are talking about places that 6 years ago were rural areas, but now becoming progressively small cities. If we have to talk about statistics, we have two main refugee sites in Cameroon. One is in the far north with about 85,000 people, and the other one in the east with more than 131,000 refugees. And it should be underlined that when we talk about these statistics, you have more than 70% of refugees integrated in local communities. Now, if you see the type of the production system that are put into place, because all these people need energy and they need food. And absolutely, they tend to collect around them and make sure that they get the energy. But the problem here is that we conducted GIS studies, and we came to realize that the places that were forests 6 years ago are becoming like airports without any trees, with a very high pressure on the resources around. And I should also mention that if we talk about the East region, it is a transitional zone. And we are at the level of the border with Central African Republic in such a way that today it becomes very difficult for women to go to the forest and collect firewood, because sometimes they have to move to 5 to 6, 8 kilometers and facing all types of problems you can imagine. Thus, it becomes a very interesting business for those who have energy, who are going around producing firewood, selling around and getting incomes. But at the same time, there is a local organization called LWF. They started training women to produce charcoal based on organic material they got from their households activities. But up to date, the percentage is still very low. So you also have charcoal and firewood coming from Central African Republic to supply, because the demand is getting more and more high. So in the context of the projects we're conducting on the ground, we've decided to put into place a kind of platform, thinking about strategies we can use to make sure that people have access to energy, and at the same time they conduct the agricultural activities. Don't forget that we are talking about an area where people are also doing livestock. So you have a lot of conflicts between people doing agriculture and those conducting livestock activities on the ground. The only solution is to put people together and think about a strategy, appropriate options that can help to make sure that wood fuel can be managed sustainably, help people to have access, and give them the possibility of putting into place a system that can help them to have food. So globally speaking, we are conducting some of our activities. I think there is the next question, I will have time to talk about them. And the most important thing to bear in mind is that no one can bring the solution alone. We have to take into consideration all the stakeholders in the area and think together about a strategy to make sure that we have a very long way. So thank you.
Thank you, Abdon. You can add on the solutions now if you want to add something.
Okay, if I have to talk about the solutions, what did we do? We conducted a series of studies that help us to see exactly the type of statistics we needed, the level of production, the quantity of charcoal that people need. And based on that, we organized a series of problem analysis workshops with all the stakeholders. I'm talking specifically about the East region. And based on the workshops, we could define the options that could help us to go forward. The first option was to produce charcoal, planting trees, and doing agriculture at the same time, because it is obvious that, as I mentioned, accessing wood fuel will also need, people will also need to have food. So what we are doing, we negotiated with the council to see in which way we can manage to plant trees and help women who do not have access to land to conduct agricultural activities. That system has been implemented in the East, in the Asia that we call the Tongia system. So based on that, people selected 2 types of products, because we are talking about fast growth species coming from, that will be implemented in the system, but people have selected 50% of trees being food trees, because we are talking about non-timber forest products, knowing that those populations are more attached to the forest because of those products. People are not used to plant trees for wood fuel. So to create a kind of incentives, we accepted to integrate food trees in the system. The second aspect we argue, and the production system we agreed to put into place, was to work with local communities, including refugees, to see in which way they could tackle the national domain where they are conducting agricultural activities. In that domain, they can then plant at the same time food trees and wood fuel and making sure that later on they can conduct what we call beekeeping to make sure that they have the possibility of generating activities and incomes. So the system we have now on the ground, the local communities have launched, including refugees. They have launched about 85,000, nurseries for 85,000 seedlings, making sure that those seedlings will be integrated in the agroforestry system. So we also negotiated with other partners like the private sector, like we had the Catholic service and other churches, ready to put into place to secure land to help us to plant more trees. And the local communities are so engaged with civil society organization to make sure that we push forward those options, including with GIZ, I should mention. So those are the solutions we are looking for, and we are quite sure that if we gather our energy and we look to the same direction, we'll get to positive conclusions.
Thank you, Abdon. Sola, what options are you and your colleagues developing in Kenya for meeting those wood fuel and crop production objectives simultaneously?
Yeah, we are working in one county, Baringo, which is also one of the northern frontier counties, really traditionally known for pastoralism. In that area, like most Eastern Southern African areas, Prosopis juliflora was introduced to arrest desertification because people were losing their livestock, there wasn't enough fodder, there wasn't enough grazing, and dust storms were everywhere, especially in the 1970s and 1980s here in Kenya. That's when Prosopis was actually introduced. And now this has become very invasive. Like most Eastern Southern African countries, it has taken over grazing lands, it has taken over cropping lands, it's threatening homes. And in the last season, it actually diverted the river because these are big thickets that are forming from Prosopis. But increasingly, people have turned to Prosopis to actually produce charcoal. And in many areas in northern Kenya, even for refugees, they're actually using Prosopis to supply firewood and also to produce charcoal. So in Baringo, with the support of the Baringo County and also really the desire by the national government in Kenya that Prosopis should be used more to produce charcoal and maybe replace some of the hardwood charcoal in the market. We are working with the charcoal producers associations to train them on how to properly harvest dry Prosopis so that they can produce high quality charcoal, have higher recovery rates from their kilns by improving their kilns. And at the same time, we have trained them on how to use the branches, the smaller branches of Prosopis to actually produce biochar. So as their lands are becoming degraded, they can introduce biochar into the farming system, which increases soil carbon, which improves soil property, soil structure. And in the few pilots that we have done, we have seen a difference between the areas where they didn't put biochar and in areas where they actually use biochar to improve crop productivity. In terms of managing and arresting the spread of Prosopis, we have not really had lots of successes. We have not really tried it working with the Kenya Forest Research Institute. We're trying to see if people can reclaim their lands from Prosopis. In literature and from experiences, it's been really a hard thing to actually remove Prosopis and reintroduce the woodlands and the cropping, but that's something that we want to do. We want to make sure that people can manage, arrest the spread of Prosopis by utilization, producing charcoal, producing biochar, but also increasingly removing Prosopis and reintroducing indigenous species. This is work in progress, and we hope we can share some results in the near future. Maybe to add on to that, there is a lot of support actually to see if Prosopis charcoal can be produced in mass to actually supply the cities here in Kenya. And I think it's something that we should do in most of the countries that have Prosopis or other invasive species to save the woodlands, use the invasive species, claim agricultural land, and try to increase productivity to increase food security.
Thank you, Sola. Musonda, just before you already mentioned that in Zambia, charcoal producers are being organized or organizing themselves for more sustainable practices when it comes to charcoal making. Are there any lessons, any insights that you could share on that?
Thank you very much, Jolene. Yes, in Choma, as a pilot area, the Charcoal Association is working with guidance from FAO, from the Zambian National Forest Commodity Association, and from the Forestry Department, suffice to say, traditional leaders inclusive, on what species to cut down. All this charcoal production is happening in open forests and community forests under a license from the Forest Department. So as we saw in the video, there's a conveyance license, which ideally should be able to control the volumes of charcoal being extracted from each geographical location. So open forests are under the jurisdiction of traditional leaders. And these are not forests which were planted. They're not exotic forests. All of them are indigenous forests with a huge biodiversity of tree species. So what we have been doing with the Charcoal Association in Choma is to make sure that when they cut down a tree, if they have to cut down the whole tree, they have to leave they have to like cut it at 45-degree angle so that it's easier for the tree to regenerate. Also, they shouldn't, they are guided to selectively cut the trees so that you do not have every single tree cut down. So there's a specific size that we have guided on the diameter of the tree. But also, if they can help it, to only prune the tree on the branches. Because remember, the carbonization process is supposed to just convert tree materials into efficient char pieces. But on top of that, we have been working with them on fire management, knowing that if wildfires are allowed to go through the indigenous forests, it has a detrimental effect on regeneration and stuff like that. So apart from that, the traditional leaders have always had a system of selecting which areas can be harvested from and which areas should be left alone. So that has been adopted since the 60s by the Forestry Department in a system called the COOP area. So blocks of forests are demarcated and allocated for harvest on a sequence of 12 to 18 to 24 month period. So for some areas, it's envisioned that within the next 12 to 18 years, the first area that was harvested would have regenerated enough by the time it goes clockwise in terms of sustainable harvesting. Yeah, so the traditional leaders are really happy because the forest is our collective heritage. And if we do not manage it, then we have other cascading problems like land degradation, loss of medicinal species, loss of food. Like there's a lot of wild fruits, the masukus, the monkey oranges, monkey bread, which if left unmanaged will lose, and people would have to start walking further and further in search of the forests. So it's still a work in progress, but we're happy to say that the Forestry Department is in the process of accepting the participatory guarantee system guidelines. What this system does is that we organize the charcoal producers and use peer pressure to ensure that each group or cluster of charcoal manufacturers are actually following the laid down guidelines of not cutting down trees without selecting specific species, and not to cut down trees along streams and riverways, not to cut down trees in certain areas, and especially not the graveyards, because those are already protected through traditional mythology that if you do cut down a tree in the graveyard, it kind of gives you bad luck and all that. So it would be nice if you could come and visit Choma and have a one-on-one discussion to understand the real dynamics as to why the charcoal producers prefer to cut certain species and how they have appreciated the fact that if their charcoal is approved by the PGS system, they can sell it openly because they would have paid for the forest license and they would achieve a more premium price as compared to the illegal charcoal manufacturing processes, which are sold on the black market at very low amounts of money as a return.
Thank you so much, Musonda. I think we heard a lot of good examples on better production systems that can accommodate both wood fuel and food production in more sustainable ways. But let's now go to the end use. What can we do there to actually reduce the demand, the need for wood fuels? Ruben, you showed us this fascinating stove at the beginning of the session. Can you tell us something more on your expertise and what you think that improved cook systems can contribute to reducing the need of wood fuel?
They can make all the difference. I mean, an efficient system that has a ventilator underneath it will very likely cut up to 85% of the wood consumption straight away. Now, if you're then going from a household that's consuming charcoal, which, as you remember, is roughly 4 or 5 times its own weight in wood, and you switch them to sustainable wood, then you've got consumption reduction in the sort of mid to high 90%. So it can be an enormous player in solving this problem. And in fact, creating an industry of sustainable biomass production in every developing country with all the economic benefits alongside. So this is something we should really, really focus on. I think one of the problems that we've had so far is that, marketing-wise, the concept of clean cooking hasn't really captured the imagination of a lot of investors. As Shah was saying, the amounts of investment capital that have streamed into this sector are pitiful. I mean, my latest figure was less than 1% of the calculated total is actually available. And I think that's in part because we haven't really been able to show what this sector is. This is not cooking. This is 99% of the energy consumption of a third to half of the global population. So let me repeat that. 99% of the energy consumption of a third to half of the world's population. And we're getting $30 million worth of investment per year. It's absolutely stunning. And it will change because we're going to start recognizing the impact of having this level of deforestation. And in certain regions, this is catastrophic. Across West Africa, you can see that the Sahel is basically migrating downwards. So a lot of the trees that are being chopped down just aren't regrowing. Those are gone forever. And I pose the question to anyone in either Africa or also in Europe, what is our plan B when the trees run out? Like, do we think that we'll have a solution then? This is a pretty existential crisis. And so the world needs to step up. They need to recognize that placing solar panels is not the solution to the thermal energy problem that we have. It's a solution to some of the energy that people need. But often it addresses single-digit percentages. The vast majority of people's energy needs are thermal, and they are addressed by one of 2 things: biomass or fossil fuel. Now, which is it going to be?
Thank you so much, Ruben. I think that is a strong message to the audience. And I want to give each one of the other panelists the opportunity to give a final remark or comment on what you think is the single most needed thing to change the sector, to have more sustainable wood fuel available for this part of the population, and to make sure that those systems also support food security. So can I give you the floor for your suggestion?
I think I'm not sure I can add more to what Ruben has said. For me, that's really the crux of the matter. We need investment in this sector. We need an investment in appropriate technologies, and I want appropriate technologies, affordable technologies and accessible technologies. So that's what we need. But for us to get there, those investments, we need an enabling framework. We also need a supportive governance system that will encourage private sector to engage and increase that accessibility and reduce the cost of the technologies. Thank you.
Thank you, Sola. Xia, one sentence, one message.
Okay, to me, I think the effective and innovative interventions are required to reduce the demand for wood fuel and also to enhance the sustainability of the wood fuel supply. This will help support the food security and the food safety and more broadly to the SDGs.
Abdon.
Thank you, Yolene. Contrary to what people think in the Congo Basin, for me, it is clear that there is a huge gap, wood gap. So we need to answer by planting trees, including wood fuel trees and food trees. And for that to happen, I think if we talk about the refugee sites, for instance, we need to put into place a kind of engagement landscape that can help us to put into place a system that can attract more investment to implement interventions that are being defined for sustainability.
Thank you, Abdon. Final message from Zambia, Musonda? No, not yet. We are receiving a lot of questions from the audience, so we will get back to that later during this event. Musonda?
Okay, so for Zambia, it's a multi-pronged approach in the sense that we need to answer the questions why charcoal is the choice for most rural communities to create an income. Then the second approach is to encourage as much as possible farm lots, wood lots that would then allow the natural forest to regenerate. And as you know, for Zambia, we have the Miombo forest, so that takes forever to regenerate. So we just need to give it a break and focus on alternative wood fuel options. For example, we shouldn't use the forest for just charcoal. It's a very unsustainable aspect, but we do have land which needs to be regenerated and reclaimed. So it's important that we have a holistic view to then cushion the economic needs of the charcoal manufacturers by giving them alternatives, as Ruben said, but also to plant fast-growing species like Grisidia and Lucina, which can still be converted into charcoal on a short-term, immediate basis. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, all. So back to you, Daniel, for the next part of this event.
Wow, that was amazing. Thank you very much, Jolene and the team. This has been very, very, very interesting, educative, and informative. Sia, Sola, Musunda, and Ruben, thank you very much for your contributions to this discussion. I can pinpoint just a few ones. Ruben is actually saying that biomass or fossil fuel. Sola is also saying that we need investment in appropriate, affordable, and accessible technologies surrounded by an enabling governmental policy to allow this work. But my question is this: what can we do? What is still being done? Thankfully, CIFOR has put together some short videos about interventions that are ongoing in the field. Yes, a lot of interventions. There is hope at the end of the tunnel. We are looking at sustainable interventions towards wood fuel usage across the value chain. Here are some few short videos to inform you on them.
I'm an eco-green charcoal consultant. So I'm here in Choma to train the charcoal producers how to produce charcoal sustainably, which is more efficient and which has less carbon and that uses less wood compared to a traditional one. The purpose is to filter the carbon out. Then the design of the kiln, it's a round kiln. So even it's different the way you pile up the wood. It was designed to reduce the labor.
réponds au nom de Georges Mumbere. Je suis expert scientifique junior en bois énergie pour l'école de SIFOR. Nous intervenons en RDC, dans la province de la Chopo, sur l'axe qui mène vers la réserve à biosphère de Yangambi. Nous intervenons sur deux axes. Du côté rive gauche du fleuve Congo, nous sommes sur le secteur Yalikanja-Yanonge, dans le groupement Yanonge, et du côté rive droite, nous sommes dans le secteur Turumbu, groupement Yawenda et groupement Yelongo. SIFOR a reçu un financement de l'Union européenne pour l'exécution du projet GML. Projet GML qui est la gouvernance des paysages multifonctionnels. Ce projet consiste à développer et tester des options de gestion durable des chaînes de valeur du bois énergie. La ville de Kisangani et ses environs ont besoin d'approvisionnement en bois énergie puisque la ville est constituée de près de 2 millions d'habitants. Le bois énergie constitue la principale source d'énergie pour la population urbaine et périurbaine. La production de Makala est fortement liée à l'agriculture sur brûlis et met en péril les forêts naturelles et particulièrement la réserve biosphère de Yangambi. Dans cette option, le projet travaille avec les producteurs de bois énergie pour les initier ensemble à tester des options de gestion durable de bois énergie. Ils ont été sensibilisés sur la problématique bois énergie. Ensemble avec le projet, ils ont fait la cartographie participative. Cette cartographie permet à représenter les différentes unités paysagères dans les terroirs des villageois. Ainsi, à l'issue de cette sensibilisation et après la cartographie participative, les communautés s'engagent à mettre en place les pépinières villageoises à production des acacias pour le bois énergie. Ces pépinières seront répliquées dans les plantations ou dans leurs champs à un système agroforestier parce que les communautés locales abandonnent leurs zones de champs après avoir utilisé la quasi-totalité de leur fertilité pour abattre encore les arbres dans des zones naturelles afin de produire et les makala et leurs cultures vivrières. D'où la nécessité d'associer les cultures vivrières aux acacias afin que les acacias puissent restaurer la fertilité du sol et cela pourra pérenniser la présence paysanne dans la zone. Mais au même moment, les acacias augmenteront la fertilité et augmentent par conséquent la production agricole dans la zone d'intervention. Les producteurs sont organisés en associations. Ces associations, c'est pour permettre de mettre en place de meilleures pratiques dans la gestion durable de bois énergie et aussi de diffuser les méthodes et les techniques de mise en place des acacias et pérenniser les activités de bois énergie. Les zones ciblées ont été les villages qui sont très éloignés de la zone de la production de bois énergie où les bois énergie semblent être rares et ainsi causer la déficit au niveau des revenus des ménages. D'où le projet a besoin de restaurer la biomasse pour la production de bois énergie et augmenter les revenus à travers l'amélioration des sols pour une bonne production des cultures vivrières. L'objectif final, c'est de réserver la zone à réserve à biosphère par la pression humaine, c'est-à-dire réduire la présence humaine dans la zone à biosphère de Yangambi et augmenter les revenus des ménages ainsi qu'améliorer le niveau de vie de cette communauté. Merci.
Je m'appelle M. Florent Caille. Je suis le chargé des programmes de l'ONG Océan. Océan signifie Organisation congolaise des écologistes et amis de la nature, une ONG basée à Kisangani. L'idée de mettre en place l'initiative sur la production de bois à énergie et capitalisation des résidus et des sillages de bois comme alternative est née à partir des observations sur les problèmes d'accroissement démographique, l'exode rural et l'urbanisation rapide constatée autour de la ville de Kisangani. Tous ces problèmes conduisent à l'augmentation des consommations de bois énergie. cela a comme conséquence l'augmentation des prix des braises. À Kisangani, actuellement, il est constaté l'augmentation de plus en plus des prix des braises. Face à ces problèmes, si fort dans son programme GML et l'ONG Océan ont mis en place un projet. Le projet consiste à la production de bois énergie et à la capitalisation des résidus de sciage de bois. Comme vous le savez, il y a à Kisangani une forte activité de sciage de bois. Toutes les scieries de la ville produisent une grande quantité de déchets. Ces déchets sont jetés et brûlés à la longueur de la journée. Donc, notre projet consiste donc à capitaliser ces déchets pour la production des briquettes. Pour y parvenir, il a fallu faire des échanges et d'expériences à Goma, où cette activité est suffisamment développée. Nous sommes allés à Goma, nous avons vu comment est-ce que l'entreprise Goma Stove produit les briquettes ainsi que les bois énergie. Alors, quand nous sommes rentrés à Kisangani, nous avons mis en place un certain nombre de matériels. Ces matériels-là constituent un ensemble d'équipements pour pouvoir nous aider à mettre en place nos briquettes. Il s'agit de l'extrudeuse, il s'agit des moulins, il s'agit des carbonisateurs, il s'agit aussi des mélangeurs et d'un petit moulin. Après la fabrication des machines, nous avons procédé par la collecte des informations, la collecte des données, la collecte des matières premières qui puissent nous aider à produire nos briquettes. Alors, nos matières premières sont constituées de 3 éléments principaux. Il s'agit des déchets, des sciages de bois, il s'agit de l'argile et de l'eau. Une fois ces éléments mélangés ensemble, à travers les machines produites, nous obtenons ces produits que nous appelons des briquettes. Même si c'est cylindrique, on les appelle des briquettes. Voilà. Les briquettes produites sont de bonne qualité et conservent énormément de la chaleur. Ça conserve énormément de l'énergie. Alors, le défi pour nous, pour le moment, c'est de voir comment est-ce que nous pouvons sensibiliser toute la population de Kisangani. Comment est-ce que nous pouvons atteindre toutes les couches des ménages pour que nous puissions, pour qu'ils soient à mesure de comprendre l'importance des projets. Pour cela, nous pensons que l'utilisation des démonstrations pourront nous aider à atteindre les opérateurs économiques ainsi que les ménages. Le deuxième défi pour nous, c'est comment pérenniser cette activité. Nous pensons que la mise en place d'une micro-entreprise pourra résoudre ces problèmes parce qu'une fois les produits mis en place, il faudra les commercialiser et les mettre à la disposition des consommateurs. Nous pensons qu'avec la contribution de tous, des supports et d'autres partenaires, nous allons y arriver et le projet va prochainement être mis en place pour soulager le problème de la consommation excessive des braises dans la ville de Kisangani. Je vous remercie.
We are African Clean Energy.
We are African Clean Energy.
African Clean Energy.
African Clean Energy.
African Clean Energy.
We are operating in.
Operating in.
Operate in.
In Lesotho.
In Lesotho.
In Cambodia. In Cambodia.
And Uganda.
And Uganda.
At African Clean Energy, our vision is a world where clean energy and connectivity is for everyone.
Our mission is to alleviate poverty on a platform of clean energy and smartphone technology.
We do this by making our clean energy system, the ACE1,
accessible to households living on $2 per day.
On an affordable 9 to 12 month micro loan.
We go directly to the customers. We go directly to the customers.
We go directly to the customer.
Demo in their village.
Demo in their village.
Meet with the local leaders.
We meet with their local leaders.
And bring customer service at their door.
We produce the ACE1 right here in Maseru, Lesotho.
And here in Siem Reap, Cambodia.
The ACE1 is a smart, clean biomass cook stove and solar home energy system.
It comes with a solar panel,
which charge the device battery and generating the electricity.
Has 2 USB ports, so our customers can charge their phone and light their home.
ACE1 is the cleanest
multi-fueled cook stove in the world.
Unlike open fires and traditional stoves, it provides users with a smoke-free cooking experience.
It will burn any dry biomass.
Our customers burn a variety of things from
sticks and twigs
to corn cobs
to cow manure
to pellets and briquettes.
Sustainably sourced.
The ACE1 burns much more efficiently than open fire or traditional cook stoves.
It reduces customer fuel need by 50 to 85%,
helping to mitigate the rapid rates of deforestation we see in Sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Asia.
By providing for their electricity needs, the ACE1 also reduces their spending on expensive lighting alternatives
such as candles or kerosene.
Our data shows that the ACE1 saves our customers 83% on their monthly energy expenses.
The ACE1 is now sold as part of the ACE Connect package, which includes a second-use Samsung smartphone with a pre-installed ACE Connect app. The app allows customers to connect their phone to the ACE1 and they can keep track of their loan repayments.
The app allows us to monitor the ACE1 usage so that we can calculate our impact across the Sustainable Development Goals.
African clean energy is contributing to
good health and well-being,
the protection of life on land,
climate action,
and affordable and clean energy access for all.
Affordable and clean energy
for everyone.
I'm proud to work for African Clean Energy.
I am proud to work for African Clean Energy.
I'm proud.
Proud
to work for African Clean Energy.
So let's get to the questions. We got so many interesting questions in from the audience. The first one is to you, Ruben, on African Clean Energy. The question is, would there not be a way to just select the best cook stoves in the market and to speed up adoption in Sub-Saharan Africa? What would be the way what would be the way forward, according to you, to get there?
My video has been blocked, but yeah, that's exactly what the way forward should be. And it's, to anyone in this industry, it's pretty obvious which are the best products. And those are the ones that should be invested in and held up as an example. And there should be a lot more collaboration in the sector.
So how could this adoption get any faster?
Again, investment capital. We're dealing with a giant sector here. And I can say from experience that even if you have all your ducks in a row, it is still really difficult to obtain investment capital.
So investment is key to make sure that this sector can expand, to reduce the wood fuel.
Yeah, I mean, there's some exciting new programs coming up, particularly around results-based financing, which is essentially where ACE, this can augment just regular commercial financing, where a non-commercial donor will set a certain goal and then put a certain premium upon achieving that goal. They let you know, this is what you have to show us that you met our goal, and then you will get X, which is a really good way of incentivizing growth, because it allows me to go to an investor and say, look, this is my business case. I make this product, I sell it for this. This is what I need in terms of costs and infrastructure. If we're successful, in addition to the margin that we generally make on the product, which is relatively low because our customers are not very wealthy, there is this external funding that comes on top of it, and that is a fantastic way of incentivizing it. And I'm pleased to see that there are a number of governments, including the Netherlands, but also the British, that are opening up programs like this, and they will make a big difference. But it's coming too slowly, and we don't have another couple of decades to work this one out because the trees will be gone. I mean, the rate of deforestation right now is terrifying. And we've got massive population growth. We've got huge trends of urbanization. Again, urbanization is when people go from burning firewood to burning charcoal, which is literally factor 4 or 5 more trees going down.
Yes, thank you. I think a question linked to that came from the audience is, how do we ensure sustainability of a sector that is actually informal? It's often informal exploitation. So what are policy recommendations to actually recommend to governments instead of the bans that we obviously cannot put in place? Sola, Abdon, what are your thoughts on that? How to incentivize sustainable practices?
I think the first thing, we need to formalize the sector a bit, because otherwise no one wants to take responsibility for why things are going bad in the sector. And also someone needs to take responsibility instead of just saying, oh, this is an energy sector problem, or this is a forestry sector problem. We really need to have some kind of multi-stakeholder engagement together to really say, take responsibility together to solve the issues in the sector. And that also speaks to dealing with corruption, because we see that this is one value chain that is really beset with lots of corruption because of this informality and lack of information. Producers don't have enough information about what is legal, what is formal, where is the market. And also, I don't think the consumers have an understanding of the impact their cooking is doing to the forest as well. So that kind of making sure there is information both ways, but really also taking the livelihood issue, but also formalizing the sector a little bit so that people know that I need my license, I need my certificate, it will be taken away, it will be refuted if I don't comply with sustainable practices.
Thank you so much, Sola. There was a practical question on the type of organization that the charcoal producers in Zambia are organized with. Musonda, what type of organization do they use?
Thanks a lot, Jolene. I just want to reiterate that it's really important that any form of intervention that we take focuses on the producers. So we need to understand the hearts and minds of the producers and what drives them before we can start to now add the aspect of capacity building. The experience we have in Choma is that the Charcoal Association is self-selective. They know each other in the community. They know who manufactures charcoal, what time they manufacture it, where the kilns are. So leveraging on that strength, it's easy to use the organization that they already have to formalize it, which we have as a legally registered association. And then it's easy to then now start to channel capacity building aspects into them. So we are able to do that because each of the producer clusters in the association have what we call a study circle. And through the FFF program under FAO, we have manuals that talk about what is the meaning of sustainable charcoal, what is the difference between ordinary charcoal and sustainable charcoal. We have other mechanisms coming in for the producers to actually understand what participatory guarantee systems are. How will I know from the city that the charcoal I am buying is from a sustainable source, for example, or that the species that have been carbonized into charcoal and I'm seeing everything is black in the charcoal bag is actually an authorized species for the production of charcoal? So I just want to reiterate from an association point of view that If we could have many more organized groups across the landscape, it will then be easier to channel all kinds of interventions through them. As we saw from the video earlier on, there's an improved kiln which has a higher efficiency of carbonization of wood. There's no ash produced, or if there is ash, it's minimal, but at least it doesn't take you 2 weeks to carbonize the charcoal for you to sell it. It takes between a day and 5 days, depending on the volume of wood fed into it. But at the end of the day, slowly the mindset of the charcoal producers we are working with in Choma is actually improving the mindset and kind of like ripple affecting other producers to say, we don't have to cut down a tree and spend so much physical energy in the laborious act of cutting down the trees. So I just want to say, we first organize them, we understand what drives them, then through their organized clusters, use that as an organization to now have all the capacity building, including introduction of solar alternatives, of all kinds of stoves. In Zambia, we have a lot of spaces where people are coming up with briquettes and energy stoves and all that. But the question is, who is that targeted to, and what is the mindset of the people receiving the alternative? Do they still just want the smell of charcoal, or do they believe that through buying wood energy saving stove, they will be then reducing their own carbon footprint and ultimately reducing on the effects of climate change, especially through deforestation? Thank you.
Thank you so much. You also brought up the issue of traceability. So like in Cameroon, there is charcoal from the wood residues, but at the moment, is there any way to see a difference between the charcoal from wood residues or the charcoal from forest? Abdon, how do you see traceability of charcoal in Cameroon?
Yeah, thank you so much, Yulin. I think there is a great need of organizing the whole sector, because it is obvious that based on the capacity we have, we can train people and produce more charcoal from residues coming from the wood processing units. For instance, at the same time, we can also take advantage of the organic residues coming from households and so on. In short, there is a possibility of supplying the market with the green charcoal, but the only problem is to make sure that we put into place a kind of regulation system that will have to be clear on the rules. Because at the same time, there is a kind of competition between the green charcoal or sustainable charcoal with the charcoal coming from non-sustainable sources. And that's where the main problem is. If you take the case of the Minister of Forestry, they're still issuing permits to cut trees and produce charcoal, when we think that there is a clear possibility of putting into place a system that can help to value the residues from the wood processing units, taking advantage of the organic material coming from the households, and supply the whole market. So, of course, we need to organize more the channel, the value chain, making sure that we connect the green charcoal to the market and convincing people that there is no need to cut trees to produce charcoal when we have residues coming from wood processing units. For instance, talking about cook stove, I think it is very clear that people would like to take advantage of innovative systems that help them to have a kind of to do economy on the quantity of the money they use every day to access this charcoal and so on and so forth. But we need to be clear on the performance of the cook stove we propose compared to the classical one they use. So once we make it sure, we can organize people and show them exactly what is their gain and how, for instance, for the whole year, if we calculate, if we use to spend, for instance, $10 a day, it's just an example. If we reduce it to $5, considering the whole year, we can see that the gain is really huge. So we need to have a kind of arguments with clear data that can help us to push people to that dimension and push the government to regulate more and see how things can go forward. For me, it is a very business area that need to be organized. That's it.
Thank you so much, Abdon. Questions keep coming in, but we're running out of time. There are questions on the alternatives to wood fuel. Xia, I think you have some resources on that. I know that a lot of the resources were also shared with you in the chat channel. So for any answers that have been unanswered, please have a look there or contact any one of us for further discussions. Back to you, Daniel, for the closing part of the event.
Wow, Jolene, it's been a very wonderful moment today. Thank you all participants. Thank you all watching live from Wova and whatever platform that we are streaming on. I just have something to do. 2 minutes. All right. Can we do this before we all go? Thank you very much. I like that. That's wonderful. So we would want to do one last poll. You can go back to Slido. All right. Thank you. Yes. That's www.sli.do. The event code is GLF1 2020. Open the room, GML and Cypher. Are we there? Great, 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 great. Now, this is the question once again. What is the first thing that comes into your mind when you think of wood fuel? Can we start answering? Now. Okay. I see a lot of answers coming in now. I see some views are changing. That's interesting. Feel free. And to those of you who had your questions not answered, the chat box for this session would continually be opened. So therefore, you can send your questions in. We can still answer them. Back to Slido. Wow. I see more positive views now. Okay, I see potential. I see small holders. I see food security. I see opportunity. I see innovation. That is wonderful. That is so wonderful. Thank you very much for your inputs. From just these answers, you can know that we have been able to drive a message across from this session. That is, there is actually alternative and sustainable way of wood fuel usage. Thank you very much for joining us, and we would want you to continue with all the other sessions in the GLF Bond 2020 Digital Conference. Don't be left out of this wonderful move digital. Take care of yourself, stay home, and observe all the protective measures while we also keep our forests alive too. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you, Cypher. Thank you all our partners for making this session a wonderful one. Enjoy the rest of the conference.